Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the 17th of November 2014. The podcast that shakes it off. This is your host, Shane Killian, and joining me again this week is Daniel Wilcox. Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Hey, glad to be back.
So in addition to the election results we had last week, there are a few more that have been reported that are of interest, so let's check those out. Just real quickly here, Alabama had a couple of good ones. They amended their constitution to strengthen the right to bear arms, and they amended the constitution to require a 2/3 majority vote to pass unfunded mandates.
Good news.
We talked about a couple of good ones in Arizona. There was another one that they rejected, which would have raised the pay of state legislators to $35,000 a year. Which actually doesn't seem like much considering what politicians usually get paid, but still good for them. California passed a proposition to reduce penalties for nonviolent drug offenders.
Well, it's something.
Yeah, well, it's a step. You know, it's happening. Colorado, we talked about the one where they rejected GMO labeling. They also rejected an amendment that would have designated personhood to fetuses. And they also passed a proposition requiring school district meetings to be open to the public. Georgia passed a prohibition on an increase in the maximum state income tax. So that's good, at least it won't get any worse.
Good.
Hawaii passed an amendment to require public disclosure of finalists for judicial vacancies, so more transparency, that's good. And they rejected an amendment to allow the state to spend public money on private programs.
Less cronyism, that's always good.
Now all they need to do is not spend public money on public programs, and we're getting there. All right, Kansas passed an amendment to allow nonprofits to hold charitable raffles.
That could be very beneficial, yes.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Gambling should just be legal outright, but at least the nonprofits can do it to make money. Louisiana rejected a new state infrastructure bank. They also rejected an amendment to increase the number of executive branch departments, and they passed an extension of a property tax break to disabled veterans. Maryland amended the Constitution to, get this is radical, require transportation funds be spent on transportation projects.
What? That's insane!
I know, radical, right? Massachusetts repealed their 2013 gas tax that increased every year with inflation. So that's good. I guess it just goes back to the old gas tax they had.
Again, it's something.
They also rejected, this is a little confusing, they rejected repealing the law that allows resort-style casinos. So resort-style casinos are legal, at least in certain cases. This measure on the ballot would have repealed that and made them illegal, and voters rejected making it illegal, so it's still legal. Nevada rejected a 2% margins tax on businesses. North Dakota also rejected a measure that would have designated personhood to fetuses. And North Dakota also passed an amendment to prohibit mortgage and property transfer taxes. I mean, the trend here is just like, stop taxing us so damn much.
That's a good trend.
Oregon, we covered last week. They passed a legalization of marijuana and they rejected GMO labeling. They also rejected an amendment to allow the state to incur more debt. It was like, no, denied, you're cut off.
Somebody has to tell them no.
Yeah. At least Oregon got the opportunity. That's more than a lot of us get. And they passed an amendment to prohibit the government from denying equal rights based on sex. And that means things like when the government is hiring people or the government is doing something, not going into the private sector and doing it. So that's good. South Carolina amended the state constitution to allow nonprofits to hold charitable raffles. South Dakota expanded all sorts of different types of gambling. Tennessee prohibited the legislature from levying any tax on earned personal income. And, you know, for a long time, Tennessee has just had no income. I don't think they've ever had an income tax. Well, now it's in the state constitution. Not only do they not have an income tax, they can never have one.
Might hitch to Tennessee.
Yeah. And they also passed an amendment to allow veterans groups to hold charitable lotteries.
Charitable lotteries and raffles seem to be, like, one of the big issues
Yeah.
in this.
Well, it's one of those things that keeps coming up, so we'll probably see it more and more. But it's like, what a state's going to do when, when their lotteries get competition, because state lotteries do not have great odds. You get better odds in Vegas than you do with the state lottery.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're a monopoly in most places.
Oh, point. You know, lotteries are actually illegal in North Carolina.
Just the state lottery. We have a state lottery, but no other lotteries are legal.
Huh.
Yeah, you got that education lottery because we got to get money for the chillins, and I'm sure that's where absolutely every penny of it goes.
Maybe we should pass a law requiring education funds be spent on education.
All right, West Virginia passed an amendment to exempt properties owned by nonprofits from property taxes. So if you're a nonprofit organization, you don't pay property taxes. And finally, Wisconsin passed an amendment to direct transportation fees to designated funds restricted to use on transportation projects. So again, if it's transportation funds, got to be spent on transportation projects.
I can't believe they'd do that, you know? Just other boondog that money.
All right, well, let's Shanghai this week's news of the bogus. So you remember those Italian geologists who were convicted of manslaughter because they didn't predict an earthquake?
Yes, I recalled that story as soon as I read that it was coming up.
Well, this is good news. An appeals court overturned their guilty verdict.
Huh.
They had been sentenced to 6 years in prison and fined a combined $10.2 million plus court costs. The appeals court overturned all of that for every defendant except one who got a suspended sentence, but they haven't released the details yet, so we don't quite know what's going on with that, but that's good. Unfortunately, there's still some bogosity among the Italian people, because as they left the courthouse, there was a crowd out there that started yelling, "For shame! For shame!"
What?
It's like, because they didn't...
There's always a margin for error.
I don't know. And this is another weird thing about Italian jurisprudence. The conviction could be reinstated by another appeal.
What?
Yeah. And see, that's something that shouldn't be allowed to happen in any system of justice anywhere. You know, you overturn a conviction, then you're either set free or you get a new trial. And we talked about this kind of thing when we covered the Amanda Knox case.
Amanda Knox, I don't think I remember that one.
Yeah, she and her fellow defendant Rafael Solicito were acquitted of the murder of Meredith Kircher, and then that acquittal was set aside with an appeal. Knox was sentenced to 28.5 years and Solicito 25.
Huh.
And they're appealing to the Supreme Court, but you shouldn't have to. I mean, once you're acquitted, that should be it. It's just crazy, but that's apparently the Italian court system. I hesitate to call it a justice system.
Well, it's not the worst idea Italy's had.
What's that?
Well, shouldn't it be obvious?
What?
Come on! Worst idea Italy's ever had.
Well, there's that whole Italian fascism thing and allying with World War II.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going with a joke or something. But, I mean, that's what should happen. These geologists should be just set free with lots of apologies from the Italian legal system. And if you remember a few weeks ago, we covered a case here in America where defendants were acquitted of charges and the judge sentenced them for it anyway. So think about that before you say it can't happen here.
I don't know, that phrase just makes me cringe. Have you ever seen Larkin Rose's documentary by that name, actually?
I have not, actually, no.
Oh, it's so good. Anyone listening, I highly recommend it. It Can't Happen Here by Larkin Rose.
Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to amazon.bogosity.tv. Okay, so I don't remember if we talked much about solar freaking roadways.
Solar freaking roadways! The best thing since horseless freaking carriages.
Well, it's a project that's ambitious to say the least. This couple wants to pave roads with solar panels to generate clean energy, and there's a lot of people for it and a lot of people against it, and lots of bogosity on both sides, but there's a smaller scale project going on in the Netherlands to make bike paths out of solar panels.
It would certainly be an interesting test.
Yeah. So the company is named SolarRoad, and they say, quote, "It's made up of rows of crystalline silicon solar cells encased within concrete and covered with a translucent layer of tempered glass." And tempered glass, by the way, is 9 on Mohs hardness scale, so that should be able to put up with it. It'll open to the public on November 12th. It will cost about $3.7 million to make 330 feet.
Oh dear.
And that'll take until 2016, and it'll generate enough electricity to power 3 households. So it's not very cost effective, and this story says it's more than 1,000 times the price of rooftop solar electricity in the United States. And no word on why it's that expensive.
Why is it exactly?
I don't know. It can't, I mean, tempered glass isn't that expensive. I don't know.
Yeah, these are the questions you have to ask. People go with, this is too expensive and that's a problem. But in order to solve that problem, you have to ask why it's so expensive.
Well, I mean, it may just be this is the first time anyone's tried anything like that. You know, you have the early adopter effect.
Yeah.
You know, the first time you try something, it's really expensive, and then as you do it, it gets cheaper and cheaper. But, I mean, they point out a lot of the same things that people did with the solar roadways. Solar panels getting covered with dirt, and so on, so you have to keep them clean. They might get scratched. Now, they are tilting the panels and giving them a non-adhesive coating. So hopefully the rain should wash the dirt off of it. And so I guess we'll see how effective that is. Of course, most solar panels work by being tilted towards the sun, and of course these aren't. And according to The Guardian, they're going to produce 30% less electricity than conventional panels.
Yes, I do recall the article actually suggesting, instead of putting it on the bike path, putting it over the bike path as a sort of rain roof.
That's something a lot of people say. It's like, well, why don't you do that? And my reaction to that is, why don't you do that? You know, if that's a good idea, let's do this. Or, you know, as we said a few weeks ago on the podcast, how about just stop the government from putting roadblocks in the way of people putting solar panels on their homes because they compete with the local power company? Things like that.
Oh, dear.
And then, of course, there's shading, there's winter, there's ice, there's bad weather, stuff like that. So, yeah. But we'll see. The idea isn't necessarily to have all our homes powered with solar freaking bike paths. But what they're saying is, quote, "Sensors gathering information about traffic circulation can help improve traffic management or even allow automatic vehicle guidance. Other possible functions are variable road markings, tag-along LED lights, and heating in winter, and eventually a system for wireless energy." And that's another thing they were talking about with the solar freaking roadways, you know, having the smart roads that can actually adapt to various different conditions. So as long as it generates enough power to break even on that, it might be worth it.
Yeah, then maybe I can actually get around without asking someone for help.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, there have been a few places that have done things like road de-icing systems, and they just have to get the power from somewhere. So, yeah, who knows?
Yeah, and of course the light up crosswalks and such.
That would work, and you could actually alert drivers ahead of time if there's an accident or something else in the road or whatever. So overall, lots of problems, but who knows? Maybe some of those will be mitigated in the future. History is written by the winners, and so apparently is economics. That's why there's LibertyClassroom.com. Probably the best single learning resource for history and economics on the web, LibertyClassroom.com teaches U.S. history, Western Civ, and economics from actual university professors. There's lots of free material to get you started, including introductory lectures on all these subjects, and when you sign up, you get the full site's content for just $99 a year, less than the price of 2 cups of coffee a month. And if you type in the promo code Bogosity in all caps, you'll get your first year for just $88. Lectures are available in both video and audio format, so you can watch or listen to them on your computer, your phone or tablet, or in your car. Learn at your own pace about the subjects you're interested in and become a more effective debater. You'll also get access to lots of supplemental materials and even the professors themselves via the discussion forum and even live video chats. Inform yourself against the myths and propaganda of our society. Visit LibertyClassroom.com. So, we've talked about the darknet and the innovations they have for delivering quality products at good prices, with consumer protections and high customer satisfaction while still being almost completely anonymous. Keyword there, almost.
Those monsters need to be stopped.
Yeah, well, that's what they're doing. The FBI has seized over 400 darknet sites on the Tor network, including the famous Silk Road 2.0. I mean, come on, guys, don't you have terrorists to find or something?
I'm glad we've already, dealt with our violent crime problems.
And I'm sure the next time I go to an airport, there won't be any security I'll have to go through because they've caught all the terrorists. So this was actually a joint operation by 16 member states of Europol, FBI, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Homeland Security. More than 410 hidden services were taken down, and over $1 million in Bitcoin and 180,000 euros in cash, drugs, gold, and silver were seized.
And of course, they're going to use this as an attempt to create propaganda against Bitcoin, gold, and silver.
Oh, of course. Well, listen to what the EC3 chief said. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but he said, quote, "Today we have demonstrated that together we are able to efficiently remove vital criminal infrastructures that are supporting serious organized crime. And we are not just removing these services from the open internet. This time, we have also hid services on the darknet using Tor, where, for a long time, criminals have considered themselves beyond reach. We can now show that they are neither invisible nor untouchable. The criminals can run, but they can't hide."
Oh, scary.
Yeah, all those horrible criminals buying and selling things. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, what are they worried about? You can't even do gang crime. It's online. They can't threaten you.
Well, they can, but...
How? They don't know who you are.
Well, I mean, I could, in a way, I could send you a threat via message or something, but...
Yeah, but what can you
the
actually...
The effectiveness of that is...
Yeah.
It's a technicality.
Well, of course, the Tor project group responded to that. They were as surprised as anyone to find out this had happened, and apparently no one had given them a heads up or anything. And they say they don't really have any information about how it was accomplished, so they can only speculate. But, if you do something stupid on there, or you don't have the right operational security, or stuff like that, like one of the stories was saying on Silk Road 2.0 was he might have given admin access to an undercover agent, who would have then been able to examine the server and get the real IP address and things like that. Or there could be bugs like SQL injections, or anything like that where you can take over the computer, as long as you can find the real IP address. The Tor network not only disguises your IP address, it also encrypts the data, but if you can find the IP address, you can find out who they are and you can go after them. And also, there is still one problem with the Tor relays that they've been trying to address for some time, and they're working on this, but basically, we've talked about Tor before, but the quick and dirty review is, when you communicate on the Tor network, your encrypted communication goes between 3 nodes, and it sends it to the first node, which peels off the first layer of encryption, and it's got the encrypted packet to send to the second node. The second node peels off that layer of encryption, sends it to the third node, and the third node gives it to its destination. Now, the darknet is where the destination is not like google.com or somewhere, but a location that's still on the encrypted Tor network. That's still private and everything. But that third node is the problem, because the whole idea is you cannot connect, person A and person B when they're talking. Alice and Bob. You can't know that Alice is talking about because there's no way to put it together. That's why you go through 3 intermediaries. 2 of them you could probably do it, but that one in the middle breaks it. But that third intermediary can see where the destination is. And so if that's a packet that's intended for Silk Road 2.0, then a traffic analysis might be able to let that node figure out what's the real IP address of Silk Road 2.0, because that's what it's sending the packet to.
So how are they going to deal with that?
They haven't announced a solution yet, but they're working on it. That's what encryption is. I mean, it's just like the old arms race. You come up with a new armament, the other side comes up with a defense for it, then the first side comes up with a way around the defense, and so on and so on and so on. That's what we're seeing here.
Huh.
Yeah, it'd be really nice if we had a place to go where we were just completely hidden and secure. But, I mean, there are backdoors into everything. There are always security glitches, things like that. You say you don't like Bitcoin? Why not? Oh, because it's not gold. No problem. Just go to coins.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to Coinable, where you can buy gold or silver coins or bars with your Bitcoins, with literally up-to-the-minute spot pricing. Now there's no reason not to jump on the Bitcoin bandwagon. Whether you're a Bitcoin miner, service operator, Bitcoin business owner, or market speculator, you can get gold and silver from reputable dealers. And Coinable has Bitcoin liquidity for fast processing of your order. Coinable even utilizes a special shipping infrastructure to ensure that your investment arrives safely at your door. And you know what? By going to coins.bogosity.tv, you won't pay a penny more, a Satoshi more for your purchase. But you'll help this podcast. You can even sell your gold and silver for Bitcoin as well. Coinable is your Bitcoin to gold marketplace. So go to coins.bogosity.tv and start turning your Bitcoins into gold now. Okay, so we've had lots of good news for gay marriage, both from the voting booths and the courts. But now, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals has gone the other way, denying the right of gay marriage in the case DeBoer versus Snyder. Yep. So what happened was, back in 2012, a lesbian couple had filed a lawsuit in Michigan on behalf of themselves and their 3 children, saying that the state's ban on adoption by same-sex couples was unconstitutional. They want to be able to jointly adopt their 3 children, and they're saying that that's a violation of equal protection and due process because Michigan law restricts that to married couples, and it doesn't recognize same-sex marriages, so there's no way for a homosexual couple to do that. So in the first round, the judge ruled for the plaintiffs, and he said that the Michigan marriage amendment violated equal protection. The defendants, the state, upholding the gay marriage ban, asserted that the ban furthered legitimate state interests in providing an optimal environment for child rearing, even though pretty much every study that's ever been done on the issue says that children do fine when they have same-sex parents.
So they made a claim and then didn't present any evidence to support it.
Well, they kept saying things like, oh, we need to proceed with caution and things like that. And Judge Friedman wrote that could be used, quote, to require that only rich, educated, suburban-dwelling married Asians may marry to the exclusion of all other heterosexual couples. And he said that it could go further and support, quote, any deprivation of constitutional rights, which calls for prompt rectification. And on the morality issue, he wrote, quote, many Michigan residents have religious convictions whose principles inform their own viewpoints about marriage. Nonetheless, these views cannot strip other citizens of the guarantees of equal protection under the law. The same Constitution that protects the free exercise of one's faith in deciding whether to solemnize certain marriages rather than others is the same Constitution that prevents the state from either mandating adherence to an established religion or enforcing private moral or religious beliefs without an accompanying secular purpose. And so he issued that ruling, and the next morning, Michigan started doing same-sex marriages.
I'm sorry, just the way he handled it is...
Oh yeah, it was beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful.
So, it ended up being appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit, and the next day, the appellate court placed a temporary hold on the order allowing same-sex marriage after 323 marriage licenses had been issued.
If I remember correctly, marriage licenses were actually initially part of Jim Crow law?
I don't know if they were Jim Crow specifically, but yeah, they were to stop whites from marrying blacks, yeah. So the appellate court ruled against them, banned gay marriage, and, I mean, their ruling is just completely full of bogosity. The main argument they were using was that it was a violation of due process and equal protection. Well, after 20 pages of bloviating on the subject, they concluded, quote, federal courts never expand constitutional guarantees in a vacuum. What one group wants on one issue from the courts today, another group will want on another issue tomorrow. Faith in democracy with respect to issues that the Constitution has not committed to the courts reinforces a different, more sustainable norm. Sorry, no. The default is not no rights unless you can get them into the Constitution. The default is that we have the rights unless you can come up with a good constitutional reason for denying them.
I seem to recall someone, during the original conception of the Constitution, questioning the notion of enumerating the rights of man.
Yeah, that was actually a big problem that people had with the Bill of Rights. And that's why the 9th and 10th Amendments are in there. The 9th Amendment is there to say, look, we're not actually enumerating rights. These are just particular ones we're worried about, but this is not to limit rights the way the enumeration of powers limits the powers of government. And then the 10th Amendment is there to say if it's not in the Constitution or if it's prohibited, then it falls to the states. Unless it's prohibited to the states, then it falls to the people. So that's why those two amendments are there, to make that absolutely crystal clear, and people deny it anyway. So they made the same bad assumption when they addressed the right to travel argument. Quote, the United States Constitution does not mention a right to travel by name. It doesn't have to. Read the 9th Amendment. The law does not punish out-of-state new residents in relation to its own born and bred. Non-residents are treated just like other citizens of that state because the state has not expanded the definition of marriage to include gay couples in all settings. No regulation of movement or differential treatment between the newly resident and the long-standing resident occurs.
So wait, the state has to expand the definition of marriage?
Well, the full faith and credit clause says that states have to recognize legal documents from other states. And that's been a big thing about this, because if you get married in South Carolina, North Carolina needs to recognize the marriage. But if it's a gay marriage, all of a sudden, all the anti-gay marriage people say, no, whoa, wait a minute.
Yes, I remember the full faith and credit. It's been a while, though, mind you.
And they also address this issue directly of recognizing same-sex marriages from other states. Quote, Ohio law declares same-sex marriage contrary to the state's public policy, placing those marriages within the long-standing exception to Ohio's recognition rule. Wow, begging the question much there? They get to exclude it because they've been excluding it.
Huh.
And their exclusion means that they can do the exclusion.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Well, one of the three judges, Martha Craig Daughtry, dissented, saying that the decision, quote, wholly fails to grapple with the relevant constitutional question in this appeal, whether a state's constitutional prohibition of same-sex marriage violates equal protection under the 14th Amendment. Instead, the majority sets up a false premise that the question before us is who should decide, and leads us through a largely irrelevant discourse on democracy and federalism. Instead of recognizing the plaintiffs as persons suffering actual harm as a result of being denied the right to marry where they reside, or the right to have their valid marriages recognized there, my colleagues view the plaintiffs as social activists who have somehow stumbled into federal court inadvisably when they should be out campaigning to win the hearts and minds of Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee voters to their cause. But these plaintiffs are not political zealots trying to push reform on their fellow citizens. They are committed same-sex couples, many of them heading up de facto families who want to achieve equal status with their married neighbors, friends, and co-workers, to be accepted as contributing members of their social and religious communities, and to be welcomed as fully legitimate parents at their children's schools. They seek to do this by virtue of exercising a civil right that most of us take for granted, the right to marry. Yeah, what she's doing, she's saying that, because that's what they did, the majority were painting the plaintiffs as a bunch of social activists trying to push their views on everything else, when really they're just people who are wanting to live their lives without all these roadblocks put in their place. They want to be able to do the same thing that any other couple in their situation would be able to do. That's all they're asking for.
So wait, they're pushing their beliefs and not the religious people now?
I know. It's the status quo fallacy. It's kind of like that whole thing about how you can somehow not have the burden of proof anymore if you make yourself the establishment. Christianity has been the established religion for centuries, therefore the atheists have the burden of proof, that sort of thing.
And, we have to prove... Statism doesn't have to prove itself.
Yeah, we have to prove that we have rights, and if it's not in the Constitution, then we're just a bunch of social activists, and we need to do it by winning hearts and minds and stuff like that. I mean, that stuff is all through their decision.
What kind of doublethink does it take?
Well, it's just they've got the conclusion they want to draw, and then they're coming up with reasons to support it. So in her dissent, she then proceeds to completely trounce their legal arguments and concludes, quote, "Today, my colleagues seem to have fallen prey to the misguided notion that the intent of the framers of the United States Constitution can be effectuated only by cleaving to the legislative will and ignoring and demonizing an independent judiciary." Because they were doing all these things like, oh, well, if you want to change it, you need to go to the lawmakers and so on. Of course, the framers presciently recognized that 2 of the 3 co-equal branches of government were representative in nature and necessarily would be guided by self-interest and the pull of popular opinion. To restrain those natural human impulses, the framers crafted Article 3, and Article 3 is the judiciary, to ensure that rights, liberties, and duties need not be held hostage by popular whims. If we in the judiciary do not have the authority and indeed the responsibility to right fundamental wrongs left excused by a majority of the electorate, our whole intricate constitutional system of checks and balances, as well as the oaths to which we swore, prove to be nothing but shams.
Wait, since when have we had a constitutional system of checks and balances?
Well, that's what we're supposed to have.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't go with, if you don't like it, you can move to another state or something.
Yeah, I don't know. But if this is any indication of how she judges everything, I gotta say, hey, Martha Craig Daughtry for Supreme Court Justice. You know?
I don't think there are any openings, are there? I haven't been keeping up with the news.
Well, who knows? Next time someone retires or whoever.
Or dies.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's a life appointment, and that's one of the big problems. But on the other hand, there's absolutely nothing that says there has to be 9 of them. They could expand it to 10 or 11 or whatever.
Huh.
And in fact, FDR threatened to do that unless Congress went along with what he wanted to do. He just stacked them with like 20 of them, or whatever. Yeah, FDR, Mr. Progressive.
Tell that to the Japanese.
Bogosity.tv and all of its services are hosted at GoDaddy. I've been very satisfied with GoDaddy's services and their wonderful 24/7 customer support for over 10 years now. So I'm happy to be able to give you this special offer. Just sign up for any new domain, web hosting, email, or other service and get 35% off with the code WOWNOBOGON. That's WOWNOBOGON. Because there's nothing bogus about these savings on quality internet hosting. Just go to GoDaddy.com and use the code WOWNOBOGON. So now let's push through a revolving door this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it goes to Jonathan Gruber, who was a key architect of both Romney Care and Obamacare. You were wondering why they were so similar. And otherwise has been heavily involved in crafting healthcare policy. He was widely credited, interviewed, and quoted during the rollout. When it comes to the Affordable Care Act, this is the guy. He helped write it, he supported it, and he even helped determine how it would be sold to the public. Well, now there are 3 videos that really put a whole lot of that into perspective, and these are all in the period from 2010 to 2013, so let's listen to them.
It's just, you can't do it politically. You just literally cannot do it. Okay? Transparent financing, unless I have transparent financing, also transparent spending. I mean, this bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay, so it's written to do that. In terms of risk-rated subsidies, if you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Okay, just like the lack of transparency is a huge political advantage, and basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass. And, it's the second best argument. Look, I wish Mark was right. We can make it all transparent. But I'd rather have this law than not.
Yes, screw transparency. I want this to pass.
Yeah. And that wasn't the only time he called voters stupid.
Hero John Kerry, or more likely his staff, came up with a great substitute idea. They said, look, what you economics nerds want to do is you want to say that for people with expensive health insurance plans, they will no longer get a 40% tax break. What if we instead just levied a 40% tax on the insurance companies that sell these terrible expensive Cadillac plans? We said, well, that's pretty much the same thing, but why does it matter? I said, you'll see. And they were both in that passed. Because the American voter is too stupid to understand the difference.
Wait a second. So they claim this is what the people want.
Yeah.
And yet they're too stupid to know they want it.
Yeah, so they have to be lied to in order to get them to support it. And he elaborated on this point in a later talk.
So basically, it's the same thing. We just tax the insurance companies. They pass it on higher prices. That offsets the tax break we get. It ends up being the same thing. It's a very clever, basic exploitation of the lack of economic understanding of the American voter.
So instead of saying, we're going to tax the American voter, he's saying, we're going to tax the insurance companies, knowing they would have no choice but to pass it on to the consumer, and they were deliberately exploiting the economic ignorance and even stupidity of the American taxpayer.
Doesn't that strike you as kind of fundamentally wrong?
Actually, it kind of strikes me as fundamentally what they do all the time anyway.
Point.
I mean, how would minimum wage laws ever get passed if people actually understood economics?
Oh, God.
And of course, this goes directly against all the claims about Obamacare when it was being passed, so he came right out and admitted that they were just telling people what they wanted to hear, even though they knew it was false, because the public wouldn't support the Affordable Care Act if they knew the truth about it.
Shouldn't that be some sort of sign or indication about, what you're doing?
Well, I mean, if you have to lie to people to get them to support it, can you really then claim to have the will of the people? Well, if that doesn't qualify Jonathan Gruber for this week's biggest Bogon emitter, I don't know what does. Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. And now let's give a safety lecture to this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire!
You okay down there?
I'm fine.
Okay. And this week it goes to Food Babe, the self-styled expert and real-world moron who tried to claim that Subway bread was made out of yoga mats. We talked about that back in March. And I wasn't going to do this one because it's a piece from 2011, but an interesting thing happened about it. Someone made a meme about something really stupid she said, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And soon after that got spread around, she took this blog post down, apparently out of shame.
Oh, wow. Classic woo move.
Yeah, and of course she hasn't done anything like post a correction or a retraction or anything like that.
I mean, she couldn't have been wrong. She just never said it.
Yeah. Well, fortunately we have the Wayback Machine, so I was able to read a cache of it. But yesterday, while I was preparing this podcast, I saw she had her entire website removed from archive.org.
How did she manage that?
Well, you can put a thing in the robots.txt telling people not to cache the website, and the Internet Archive will respect that. And then they just take down everything. All of the site from all time. But guess what?
You have copies.
I had saved a cache of it. The link is in the show notes. So we can go through this plain wreck of an article and see why you shouldn't trust anything the Food Babe says ever. And I said plain wreck because this article, the article Food Babe doesn't want you to see, is all about riding in an airplane.
Safest way to travel.
So check out her first claim. Quote, when your body is in the air at a seriously high altitude, your body undergoes some serious pressure. Just think about it. Airplanes thrive in places we don't. You're traveling in a pressurized cabin, and when your body is pressurized, it gets really compressed. Yeah. She thinks, apparently, that airplanes pressurize the cabin to greater than 1 atmosphere of pressure.
What exactly now?
Well, when you're flying up at 30,000 feet or whatever, the air is really, really thin. So what they do is they pressurize the cabin so that it's more like the atmosphere is around 8,000 feet. So that you don't have all of these problems, and most people can function just fine at 8,000 feet. But you're actually undergoing a lower pressure than you are when you're on the ground, unless you're climbing Mount Everest or something like that. You're undergoing a lower pressure, so all these things she's talking about, your body being compressed and everything, no! It's lower pressure, not greater. It's just not as low as it would be if they hadn't pressurized the cabin. Quote, additionally, the pressurized cabin reduces the humidity by 40% of what humans typically thrive at. The Sahara Desert has more humidity at 25% than your airplane does at 10%.
Doesn't this all kind of fall under the naturalistic fallacy?
It actually falls under the "this completely isn't true at all" fallacy. The average humidity of the Sahara Desert is indeed 25%, but that's mostly due to high humidity at the coasts and around rivers and other waterways. According to Wikipedia, quote, the relative humidity of the air is generally extremely low to very low during summer and very low to low during winter. The region's low relative humidity rarely exceeds 30% and is often in the 4 to 5% range. So it's actually half of what an airplane is. And I mean, if you live in some place like Tucson, that's what it is in the summer anyway. I mean, basically, as long as you're not already dehydrated and you don't have some kind of medical condition, you shouldn't have to worry about the pressure or the humidity.
And, you know, you can always get a bottle of water.
Yeah, well, she gets into that, but we'll get there. Quote, remember, your body is made up of 50% water. It's actually a bit more than that.
Wait, 50%?
It's more like 70%. If the humidity is reduced by 40%, your body becomes very dehydrated. I wonder if she thinks you just subtract the 40% from the 50% or something like that.
Where is she getting these numbers?
Very quickly and usually without you feeling the effects until after you get off the plane. Dehydration causes all sorts of issues from fatigue, headaches, constipation, lightheadedness, and even death in extreme cases. The relative humidity inside an aircraft at cruising altitude is similar to being indoors during winter or being outdoors in a dry area in summer. If you already have low hydration, it might make it worse, but most people don't have to worry about it. And by the way, this whole thing about you don't feel the effects, yeah, you do. It's called being thirsty. If you're thirsty, drink some water. That's pretty much it.
Luckily, I always keep a bottle on my person for just such an occasion.
Oh, it gets worse. Quote, the air you are breathing on an airplane is recycled from directly outside your window. That means that you are breathing everything that the airplane gives off and is flying through. Does she think you're breathing jet exhaust?
Does she cite a single word of this?
Oh, of course not. But I mean, here's the thing. Airplanes move through the air. Right? You have the jet fuel that gets sprayed out the back of the engines, and thanks to Newton's third law, that moves you forward. So the cabin air is actually going to come from air in front of you, and actually it's fed from the jet compressors, which means they're getting it from directly in front of the wings, and it's every bit as clean as the air you're about to fly into. And there's no jet exhaust or anything like that, no chemtrails or anything like that. She probably believes in chemtrails, wouldn't put it past her.
I wouldn't.
But none of that is what got her so much scorn and ridicule with the meme. This next part is the one that did it. Quote,
oh, this should be good.
the air that is pumped in isn't pure oxygen either. It's mixed with nitrogen, sometimes as much as 50%.
Gasp!
To pump a greater amount of oxygen in costs money in terms of fuel, and the airlines know this. The nitrogen may affect the times and dosage of medications, make you feel bloated, and cause your ankles and joints to swell.
Wouldn't pure oxygen actually,
Yeah, you don't want more oxygen because it's a fire hazard. And the big problem is, the air you're breathing right now is about 78% nitrogen. That's what our atmosphere is. It's mostly nitrogen.
People are just so familiar with that we breathe oxygen, therefore the air must be oxygen.
Well, I mean, we do, But, I mean, there's nitrogen, too.
That's what I mean. People are more familiar with the oxygen than the nitrogen.
Yeah, but I remember learning in school air was mostly nitrogen, and...
I don't remember covering that, to be honest.
Beekman's World, Bill Nye, they all went into it.
Oh, wow.
Basically, anything about the atmosphere will tell you it's mostly nitrogen. So this is the level of research we have from Food Babe. She doesn't even know as much as she would learn by watching Beekman's World. After all that, do we really have the strength to go over her amazing fail of flying tips?
We must.
We must soldier on, yes.
It's our duty.
All right. Before you fly, this is before, choose a seat as close to the front as possible. Pilots control the amount of airflow, and it's always better in their cabin. No, everyone gets the same air, and it's pumped in from the jet compressors. Like I said.
Wait, since when do pilots control the...
Well, I mean, I guess they control the jet engines, and the jet engines compress the air in. I don't know. It is better to digest as much of your food as possible before getting on the plane. It doesn't matter. Especially since you're mostly sitting down. That's actually a pretty good way to digest. The third tip is actually good. It's exercise. Get some exercise, get some stretching before you spend long periods sitting down. Fourth, drink at least 16 ounces of water before your flight.
16 ounces. Let me do the math here.
Yeah, basically, it's basically a typical bottle of water. Yeah, drink a whole bottle of water. And limit alcohol and caffeine. There really isn't any reason to do that because even the caffeine in a strong cup of coffee isn't enough to cause you any dehydration, and you're actually getting more water in the coffee than you lose. And same with alcohol. Usually the kind of alcohol that you drink in an airplane, it doesn't have that much alcohol in it. And I mean, like if you're drinking really, really hard liquor, yeah, or you're drinking so much of it you get drunk, yeah, but you're not really drinking that much. Normal drinking you don't have to worry about. 5, bring your own food. Airport and airplane food is overly processed. There's that nice little word process. Doesn't really mean anything, but it scares you.
Buzzword.
And contains more GMO, pesticides, MSG, and chemicals that can make your head spin.
I seem to remember this one thing where Hawkeye posted the exact chemical makeup of an apple.
Yeah, scary stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've debunked GMOs. We've talked about the pesticides, and chemicals is another nice little buzzword. Water is a chemical, and she just told us to drink 16 ounces of that.
Should we ask her about banning dihydrogen monoxide?
And MSG, that's been another whipping boy of the dietary know-it-alls. But in the normal amounts that you eat in food, even in foods that typically have a lot of it, there's no health detriments to it. None have ever been found from consuming MSG. And it's actually organic. Tell that to Food Babe and watch your head spin.
Oh, dear.
It's actually an organic salt. They try to sell you organic salt when it's normally just
salt?
When it's normally just sodium chloride. MSG is an organic salt, though, actually. The chemistry of it. And then she says to bring an empty water bottle to refill during the flight. I like to bring at least 32 ounces of extra water with me on any flight.
So do I, but I dehydrate easily.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a situation like that where you've got to worry about dehydration, yeah, most of us don't. And actually, if you drink too much water, we've talked about this before, you can get water toxicity. And that can be a big problem. And that's something that a lot of runners have had because, these marathon runners, they have this saying, you can never drink too much water. They're just constantly drinking water, drinking water. Yeah, you can drink too much water. And it can cause problems.
Oh dear. I'll need to look into this.
Yeah. And also, the more pure water you drink, the fewer electrolytes you end up having because you're sweating out the water and electrolytes. And then when you're drinking the water, you're just putting the water back in.
Huh.
So we need to worry about the electrolytes too. So yeah, I mean, basically, if you're thirsty, drink. Make sure you've got your electrolytes going, but I mean, most of us don't have anything to worry about. Oh, number 7. Ask your acupuncturist or naturopath for herbs that can help prevent you from contracting colds, flus, and other viruses through the recycled air.
Acupuncturist
or naturopath.
Wait, she's serious?
Yes.
Let me laugh even harder.
I don't think my audience needs me to explain why that's Bogosity, but I do want to mention this thing about getting colds and stuff through the recycled air. First of all, the air is not recycled. New air is being pumped in all the time, like I said. In a plane, you're actually in greater danger from getting sick through touch, because you're touching things that the people in the plane before you have touched and so on. So that's what you have to worry about more than anything else. So if you're at all germophobic, just get some, hand sanitizer or whatever and just sanitize everything around you and be careful of what you touch. But you've got more to worry about contracting things through touch than by breathing. And she says, moisturizer and a little spray bottle of Evian Spritzer can do wonders in rehydrating your skin on long flights. Well, I mean, I'm someone who gets really dry skin, and yeah, I like to have the moisturizer, but Evian Spritzer is just water. That'll actually dry you out. Because you put the water on the skin, the water evaporates, and that dries it out. So moisturizer, yes. Spritzer, no. Now, all that is before you get on the plane. In flight, drink 8 ounces of water for every hour of flying time. And you're going to be so bloated by the time you get off the plane if it's a long flight.
So she actually tested this?
She lists precisely 0 tests that she has done of this. 2, if you experience a headache, pains, or aches, I have no idea what this has to do with flying, but think about using turmeric, garlic, or willow bark, which are all natural alternatives to aspirin. Okay, aspirin is acetylsalicylic acid, which is in willow bark. So first of all, it's the same stuff. Second, willow bark gets you all sorts of other stuff, and what the heck is that? And third, you have to eat a lot of willow bark to get the same amount of acetylsalicylic acid in one tiny aspirin. Just take the freaking aspirin!
Yeah, I mean, the aspirin doesn't have all the other unpredictable wild cards, and,
yeah,
it's got more of what you need in there.
Well, and if you're sensitive to aspirin, you shouldn't take aspirin, but that also means you shouldn't be eating willow bark because it's the same stuff! Fast or eat small, light carbohydrate-rich whole foods. Limit any heavy dairy or protein-rich foods. Whole grain carbohydrates are better tolerated than proteins at a high altitude. It doesn't matter, people. Your body doesn't care what altitude you're at when you're digesting things. Yeah, this is Shane jumping in here in post because I want to clarify that last comment I just made. If you are at a high altitude, your digestion can be affected, but first of all, it's higher than the 8,000 feet that the pressure inside the plane simulates, so even then it's pretty much across the board stuff. Your body just isn't as good at digesting foods, and sometimes you can actually ease high altitude digestive problems by eating foods richer in carbohydrates, but other than that, it really doesn't matter, and you're not going to experience that on a plane. I mean, you have to be on a mountain or something higher than 8,000 feet in order to get that, so I just wanted to clarify that, so back to the podcast. Don't drink alcohol or caffeine, we covered that. 5 is good. Walk or stretch every 30 minutes while in flight. If you can't get up from your seat, rotate your ankles. I mean, I like doing that because you're cramped in those tiny little coach seats. So yeah, just kind of get up and move around when you can. And 6 is good. We mentioned the hand sanitizer. Keep your hands clean with that. Avoid touching your face as much as possible because that's a big vector for germs. And 7. Don't forget to take your natural herbs that can strengthen your immune system. I mean, it's just like every single myth all just plopped into one. And that whole thing about drinking 8 ounces of water every hour, keep that up after the flight.
Oh, dear.
And do yoga, get a massage, whatever. Eat circulation-enhancing foods.
Oh, you'll want to see a shaman after that, too.
Yeah. And then go have a voodoo guy make you a little gree-gree. Got to ward off those evil spirits. And swim, take a shower or a steam bath to rehydrate your skin. Again, that just dries it out because as soon as the water evaporates. Yeah, this is all one big pack of fail. And especially with the nitrogen thing, Food Babe has just shown her complete ignorance of the subject, which could be forgiven if, after the error was pointed out, she corrected herself. But she didn't. She took down the blog post, and then, when the archive.org link got passed around, thanks to yours truly, I kept posting it to the different places, so I'm claiming credit for that. She took that down too.
Now you have to keep posting your copy.
There you go. But that shows she's not just ignorant, she doesn't care.
She knows where she went wrong now, and now she's just outright denying it rather than...
Yeah, I'm just trying to cover it all up. So after that, only Food Babe could possibly be named this week's...
Idiot Extraordinaire!
Hold on, let me get my 8 ounces of water.
Okay, yeah. Please drink 8 ounces of water before doing the Idiot Extraordinaire statement.
Sorry.
Well, that wraps up this Spam, Egg, Sausage, and Spam edition of the Bogosity podcast. Please visit the forums at bogosity.tv where you can read the show notes and join the discussion on these and other subjects. This podcast is free, but not free to produce. So please donate via PayPal or Bitcoin at the top of the Bogosity.tv website or down the right-hand side of the podcast page and give generously to keep this podcast going. And if you'd like to contribute to the podcast, just send a question, statement, news article, or rant to podcast@bogosity.tv. Put it in an audio file, and if it's good enough, it'll get played right in the podcast. Thank you for listening, and thanks again to Daniel Wilcox for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Next week is our second block of filming, and the week after that is Thanksgiving, so no podcast for 2 weeks. We'll see you again in December. Until then, here's a quote from Bertrand Russell. There is something feeble and a little contemptible about a man who cannot face the perils of life without the help of comfortable myths. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 3.0 Unported License. Bogosity. Christmas time is coming, and the most classic of Christmas stories is A Christmas Carol. But how much do you know about the original Charles Dickens novella? Have you dismissed it as a children's book with one-dimensional characters amounting to nothing but platitudes and cliches? Maybe your appreciation of the book was even muted by those dry, boring, annotated books they made you read in school. My book, the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, uses both facts and humor to present the book in a way you probably haven't seen it before. Giving praise when deserved and beratement when warranted, this book is put in the perspective of its time and shows a dimensional, multi-layered Ebenezer Scrooge from start to finish. Skepticism, history, and even economics are employed to show the book in relation to today in an easily accessible format. Appreciate the Christmas of your youth all over again. Get the sarcastically annotated A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, available at Amazon and on PDF as well.